We gotta make this video as soon as we can, because you never know when guys are actually gonna get traded in the National Hockey League, when they exit the market, and when they are no longer suitable to be discussed as trade candidates. That's exactly what we have on our hands right here. A trade candidate. And we're asking whether or not this candidate could link up with the Montreal Canadiens, courtesy of an article posted by Jonathan DiGregorio on donlescoulisses.com. Let's talk today about Calgary Flames center Morgan Frost, and whether or not he could be a Hab this upcoming year. Now, I always like to take the opportunity to talk about Frost and his entire story, mostly because of what this guy was once upon a time in the OHL, when he played for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds and was an absolute menace in this league. Frost was a former first-round draft pick by the Philadelphia Flyers in 2017, a player who inevitably became one of the strongest CHL point producers around for the next 2 seasons. As a result, we actually did make a video 7 years ago asking whether or not the Philadelphia Flyers drafted the biggest steal of the 2017 draft. I remember making this thumbnail in college. I was sitting in the sound design studio just trying to listen to my prof, Dennis O'Neill. He's passed away since, R.I.P. Very great teacher, very great person. And he was teaching us just the ins and outs of using Adobe Audition to figure out the proper balances of highs and lows in our audio files. I made this thumbnail back then. And it was for a prospect that I was super high on back in the day. Morgan Frost, unfortunately, never became the potential 60, 70, 80 assist playmaker that some of us thought he would be at the National Hockey League, but he did get 46 points in 81 Philadelphia Flyer games 3 years ago. Give it a while for Frost, and inevitably, he is included in a trade over to the Calgary Flames, for which I believe was that the Farabee trade? Ah, yeah, it was the Farabee and Kuzmenko-Pelche trade. That was literally last year. Okay, that was a while ago. And Morgan Frost since was able to put up a reasonably good 22 goals and 43 points with the Calgary Flames this previous season in a full season. He was a -16, 28 penalty minutes, maybe not the best player on a team that wasn't the best either. But now we're looking at Frost, a guy who has $4.3 million a season to be paid out over the next year. He's got 1 more year left on that contract, and he's 27 years old. And we're asking whether or not Frost could be an option at center for the Montreal Canadiens. DiGregorio has the post on donlescoulisses.com. This will be linked in the description. Even though several teams have been active in recent weeks, several rumors continue to circulate throughout the NHL. Big names like Larkin could still change teams, and depth players could interest clubs like the Canadiens. Here are the latest rumors coming from all corners of the National Hockey League. 1. Morgan Frost could be an interesting option for the Montreal Canadiens. The Flames are rebuilding, and they could continue to part ways with some players. According to David Pagnotta, who was a guest on the Hello Hockey podcast, the names of Zach Whitecloud, but also Morgan Frost, are still on the market. Frost is a 27-year-old left-hand center, a good playmaker with good vision and good hands, who has never really reached his full potential that could interest a team that wants to strengthen at their center position. Like the Montreal Canadiens. He ended up scoring 43 points in 82 games last season. However, he lacks robustness in his game, in addition to being inconsistent, and would more realistically be a third-line center than a second-line center. Man, I just know that the version of me who was editing that Morgan Frost thumbnail 7 years ago would have been pretty disappointed to hear that. Frost was always one of these guys that we thought had superstar potential, just based off of what he was doing in the OHL the very next year after being drafted. Just to put things into perspective here, In the 2017 draft, Frost went in that spot, 27th overall, and just a few picks earlier, you had Nick Suzuki, who went 13th overall to the Vegas Golden Knights. Compare and contrast these guys and their OHL point production post being drafted, and you will see that Morgan Frost actually outscored Nick Suzuki by 12 points. He had 3 more games, but still the point per game number was higher on Frost's behalf versus Nick Suzuki. Aaron Luchuk was the number 1 point producer in the Ontario Hockey League that season. He is now an Orlando Solar Bear, and it looks like he has carved out a pretty nice career for himself in that league. Nothing to scoff at. You can't really be too disrespectful to a guy who has found a way to make it work as a pro hockey player, but just look at these guys that were after him. Morgan Frost, Jordan Kyrou, Nick Suzuki. Frost was supposed to be that guy, man. Sure, maybe he wasn't the most physically mature at the time, even though right now he's 6 feet 192, kind of a chonky player. There was always a question as to whether or not Frost would develop his physical game, because back in the OHL he was kind of smaller and he didn't have nearly that many pounds on his frame. Frost was more of a soft hands, quick thinking sort of playmaker, and it's why he was able to get back-to-back 70 assist seasons in the Ontario Hockey League. But sometimes strong production in the CHL doesn't necessarily translate to National Hockey League stardom. Sure, it can be successful, and that's what he was able to provide with 3 40-point seasons under his belt so far, but if the Calgary Flames are interested in selling this guy off, I do question if teams would be acquiring him because they think, this is a player that still has that potential. Or if they're just acquiring a guy because they think, we kind of need a 40-point center. Let's get him. For what it's worth, Frost is 27 years old, and if you take a look at the ice time, it's not like he was being given the most in the world this previous season. There were some 19-minute games in there, but also a bunch of 15-minute games and 14-minute games. It's not really like Frost was tasked with being a bona fide top 6 center anyway. There are even some games here where he's got 10, 11, 12 minutes per night. If you were to take advantage of Morgan Frost and his skill, you probably want to guarantee this guy gets at least second power play time, and at best, second line center minutes. If you're fully willing to give this kind of a guy that type of deployment, then hey, be my guest. I just question whether or not Martin St. Louis would be interested in that sort of a deal here. Maybe it's a little too risky if you're asking a team like the Montreal Canadiens that actually does have some reasonable cup hopes over the next little while. Maybe this upcoming season can be a prove-it year for Frost. If he can pull off the old Anthony Mantha and get 30 goals and 30 assists for 60 points, despite having played all this time in the NHL so far. I don't want to say 27 is young. It's not really. But I do hope that this profile still exists somewhere in there. For me personally, I just want to look at all the guys that I idolized and thought would have been great back in the 2017, 18, 19 era, and just hope that they still have it in them to become what they could become. I mean, look at all these guys in the OHL that season that were strong. Jason Robertson, Evan Bouchard, Akil Thomas, he's a Vancouver Canuck now. So with all that said, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think Morgan Frost is a reasonable Montreal Canadiens center target? He's left-handed, which helps out because Suzuki and Evans are both righties. Having more diversity down the middle was always more beneficial. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Frost and his trade potential for Montreal. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.